Welcome to the AMN Holism video blog. In this episode, I'm going to take you guys through an assessment and calibration process for the spine to improve overall or global range of motion. For this process to be effective, we have to get a baseline measurement in someone's toe touch or roll down. To do that, you want to ask them to first soften their knees and then ask them to gently roll forward to the floor, stopping when they first feel any particular buildup of tension. People will tend to notice the calves or the hamstrings in particular. Now that first range of motion is their baseline resting level of tension. You are then going to utilize touch, literally contacting various levels of the spine as an assessment process to see how if they get an increase in their range of motion, or indeed if they get a decrease. It may be that you have no effect whatsoever, but often there's going to be an increase or a decrease at particular parts of the spine. An increase in the range of motion is showing that that area most likely had a held sympathetic charge, which means a heightened autonomic state relative to the sympathetic nervous system in comparison to other areas. When you've touched that area, you've dropped the charge for a moment in time, and they get an increase in parasympathetic effect and increase in their range of motion. We can then utilize what we call a piezoelectric tapping stimulus, which is quite literally tapping on the bony area that increases the range of motion to increase voltage in the area, which then allows a further increase in range of motion to occur. So first up, let's establish a baseline range of motion, which is the baseline level of resting tension in the system, which is relative to the autonomic nervous system. So you just slightly soften the knees, roll forward, and just stop where you first feel a buildup of tension. All right, great. So we've got fingertips to the floor, back to the top. That's our baseline range of motion. I'm just going to utilize fingertips to touch various levels of the spine, starting off by contacting the majority of the joints of the cervical spine. I'll ask you to roll forward again. And that's a very similar response, not a whole lot of change. I'm then going to move down and contact the upper thoracic spine with my fingertips again. I'll ask you to roll forward. And now we've got a marked increase in the available range of motion. Again, what that means is that we've dropped some sympathetic charge. There's been a parasympathetic effect, and we have an increase in the range of motion. I now need to identify which of the vertebrae it actually is. So I'm going to start off by contacting around T1. That's kind of back to the initial tension. I'm going to move my fingertips down and contact the next vertebrae down around T2. Again, a similar level of tension. So we must be in this T3, T4 sort of area. I'm going to contact that with 3 fingertips. Let's roll down again. And there it is. That's where the increase in range of motion occurs. Now, all I'm going to ask you to do is tap on that specific vertebrae, which is a piezoelectric stimulus, for around 20 seconds. So quite literally, I'm just tapping on that bony site. And as we do this, piezoelectricity is released into the system, so we're literally releasing a current of electrons into Luke's body, which increases voltage. And then following that, roll down again, and we should see a sustained increase in the range of motion without the touch. That can be repeated throughout the entire spine, touching various areas until you find an area that does increase markedly the range of motion.